The courtroom was already heavy with routine before the disruption arrived. Paper shuffled, shoes scuffed against tile. A quiet line of ordinary people waited their turn, each carrying a small mistake, a minor worry, a hope that today would end quickly. It was an unremarkable morning, the kind that passes without memory, the kind judges see thousands of times in a career. Then the doors opened. He entered like someone stepping onto a stage he believed he owned. 22 years old, perfectly tailored suit, shoes polished to a mirror shine. Confidence worn like armor. The kind of confidence that does not come from experience or wisdom, but from insulation, from never having been told no in a way that mattered. He did not look around with curiosity. He scanned the room as if assessing value, as if measuring who deserved his attention and who did not. Phones came out, a message was typed. A sigh followed, loud enough to be noticed. This was not just another defendant. Everyone felt it. The charge itself was simple. A parking violation. One that, on paper, could have been resolved in minutes. But context has weight, and choices leave shadows. He had parked a luxury sports car in a handicapped space outside a children's hospital. Not briefly, not mistakenly, for nearly 4 hours, during a weekday, while attending a private event nearby. The accessible ramp had been blocked. A family had been turned away. A child in a wheelchair missed a scheduled appointment. When his name was called, he stood without urgency. The judge asked the routine question. Calm voice, neutral tone. A chance, as always, to take responsibility. The response came without eye contact. Not guilty. The words were casual, dismissive, spoken while scrolling. As if the courtroom were a waiting room and the law an inconvenience. He added explanations that sounded rehearsed but careless. The sign was unclear. The time was short. No real damage had been done. He shrugged, a small gesture loaded with certainty that consequences were for other people. There is a particular silence that settles when entitlement reveals itself openly. It is not loud. It does not shout. It simply drains the air from the room. Evidence was reviewed. Photographs showed the signage. Video showed the deliberate pause, the glance at the symbol painted on the ground, the choice made anyway. A hospital administrator's statement described apologizing to a parent who had done nothing wrong except arrive when access was blocked. The judge spoke again, measured and firm. The purpose of such spaces, the responsibility that comes with public access, the fact that rules written in paint and metal exist to protect people who already face enough obstacles. That was when the young man finally looked up. His expression was not apologetic. It was evaluative, as if he had decided the conversation had gone on too long. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowered, but not with respect, with implication. He explained who his father was, a powerful executive, thousands of employees, a major taxpayer, a man with connections. Names were implied rather than spoken, as if that alone should settle the matter. Then came the threat, dressed as advice, budgets, appointments, influence, the suggestion that resistance would be inconvenient, that cooperation would be easier. No one moved. Some people stared, others looked down. The court reporter froze for a half-second, unsure whether what had just been said truly belonged on the record. The judge removed his glasses. For those familiar with the rhythm of a courtroom, that gesture was not anger. It was focus. It was recognition. Because sometimes, in a face you do not expect, you see an echo of a past you never forgot. The judge asked one question, the father's name, spoken clearly, confirmed with pride, and then the room changed. The judge stood. not abruptly, intentionally. He stepped down from the bench and walked closer, not in confrontation, but in gravity. Every footstep slowed time. He began to speak, not as a judge delivering a ruling, but as a man opening a door that had been closed for decades. He spoke of a different version of the father, not the executive, not the name on buildings. A younger man, a desperate one, recently laid off, facing eviction, a pregnant spouse, bills stacked higher than hope. He described a visit to a small law office long before titles and power existed, a man asking for help he could not afford, a wrongfully withheld paycheck, $7,000 that meant the difference between shelter and the street. The judge explained that he had taken the case without payment, not because it was easy, because it was right. Months of work, resistance from a company confident that pressure would force surrender. A fight not for prestige, but for fairness. When the case was won, the father had cried. Not quietly, not politely. He had cried like someone whose future had been returned to him. He had made a promise, spoken with shaking hands and wet eyes, a promise that if success ever came, his child would know what integrity looked like. The young man's posture collapsed inch by inch as the story unfolded. Confidence drained from his shoulders. His hands trembled slightly. The world he had inherited without context suddenly had a history. The judge explained what that $7,000 became: tools, a truck, a first contract, momentum, growth, opportunity layered on opportunity. Everything the young man had treated as proof of superiority was, in truth, the result of mercy shown to his father when he had nothing. The judge did not raise his voice. He did not insult. He simply stated the reality. "When you threaten me," he said, "you threaten the foundation of your own life. When you dismiss the needs of a disabled child, you betray the values that once saved your family." The silence was unbearable. The young man spoke again, but the voice was unrecognizable, small, unsteady. He said he did not know. He said his father never told him. Ignorance is not innocence, but realization is the beginning of change. The judge returned to the bench. He placed a call. The father answered quickly. The conversation unfolded in the open. The behavior, the threats, the arrogance, the setting, the blocked hospital access. On the other end of the line, the pause was long. When the father spoke, his voice carried weight that money could not soften. Shame, regret, responsibility. He apologized, not defensively, completely. He addressed his son, reminded him who had stood between their family and homelessness, who had chosen compassion without obligation. He did not argue the sentence. He supported it, because consequences teach what comfort cannot. The ruling reflected accountability, a fine appropriate to the violation. Community service structured to confront the harm directly. Months of time spent assisting those whose access he once obstructed. Presence, where empathy could no longer be optional. But the transformation did not end there. Weeks later, the young man returned, not summoned, but committed. He spoke differently. He listened. He described names, faces, stories. He described learning, how long simple tasks take when mobility is limited, how patience becomes necessity, how dignity is preserved through consideration. He described purchasing a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, not for show, for use. The parking space that once symbolized disregard had become a place of care. The father stood beside him, quieter than before. Two men met again after decades, not as rescuer and rescued, but as witnesses to what accountability can create. The judge kept a letter written by the young man to the child whose appointment had been missed. Not as evidence, as reminder. Because justice is not only about punishment, it is about restoration. It is about interrupting cycles before entitlement hardens into cruelty. It is about reminding those with power that it is borrowed, not owned. The courtroom returned to routine after that day, but no one who was present forgot it, because sometimes the most powerful verdict is not a sentence, but a revelation. And sometimes the person you attempt to intimidate is the reason your life ever stood a chance. If this story made you reflect, if it challenged the way you think about privilege, accountability, and responsibility, do not leave without taking action. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes consequences still matter. The next story may be the one that changes how someone sees the world.